This was back whenever I was about 17 years old. I used to spend a lot of time walking in the woods, on the walking paths that had been either paved or had been walked down so often that they were stamped down into the dirt. I lived in a pretty decent suburb. There were quite a few people that lived there, but it's never been heavily populated. There were neighborhoods here and there, but a lot of trees in between them. I was pretty heavy into fitness and being active, so I was spending hours every week jogging and walking through those paths. This was a pretty normal day. I was home, I think on spring break, and my parents were at work. I decided to take a nice little hike through the woods behind my home. I've always found that the forest was calming and a peaceful escape from the hustle and bustle of everyday life. I would grab my Zune, which should date this story a bit, and head out into the woods to listen to whatever I had downloaded at the time. On this day, after about 20 or 30 minutes, I started feeling a bit off. It was hard to describe. I just kind of felt a bit of anxiety, which was not normal for me. I couldn't shake this feeling that something around me was watching me or following me, but I kept telling myself that it was just my imagination. I glanced behind me and around me, and I couldn't see anything that would cause me to have those feelings. The woods were actually incredibly still and empty. After a few more minutes, that anxious feeling dug deeper, and I literally felt the hair on my neck start to stand up. I got this really weird chill down my spine. I paused my music and closed my eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath in a way to gather my thoughts. I pulled my earphones down and listened to the woods. Nothing was out of the ordinary. I decided to pause and, squat down for a moment to catch my breath and get through what I assumed was an anxiety attack. As I was sitting there, breathing and thinking that everything was okay, I heard steps a bit off to my right. I opened my eyes again and turned my head, and that's when I saw it. This was a creature unlike anything I had ever seen before, and I don't say that lightly. This thing was tall, easily 7 feet tall. It was slender, scrawny even, with long and spindly-looking limbs that seemed way too long for its body. Its neck was elongated. It wasn't quite giraffe-like, but the neck was longer than what I would expect any normal creature's neck to be. The flesh that was clung tightly to its muscles and bones was this sickly, pale yellow color, kind of like the underbelly of a catfish, if that makes sense. The skin almost looked rubbery, again, like that of a catfish, and it sort of shimmered in the sun. It got worse when this thing turned to look at me. Its eyes were like two deep, empty holes. I just sat there, staring at this horrible creature as it walked slowly through the trees, just sort of slowly trotting like it was trying to avoid my attention, even though I was staring at it. After a few steps, it slowly crouched down, much like how I was crouching, and my mind immediately went into, this thing is going to pounce or run at me. That was enough to kick my brain into overdrive, and before I knew what was happening, I was running my back end off. It didn't really feel like I had a choice, more like my survival instinct had taken over. I remember my heart pounding in my ears, the taste of salt on my tongue as it dried out, and this overwhelming urge to just keep running until I knew I was safe. I dashed through the woods, branches scratching me up, but I was completely ignoring them. My mind kept flashing back to those pits that thing had for eyes, that sickly color of its skin. I kept glancing back to see if this thing was following me. Thankfully, it didn't chase me. Or at least I didn't see anything to indicate that it had followed me. maybe it was just as surprised by my sudden flight as I was. I made it back to my house and slammed the door shut behind me. I was shaking, out of breath, drenched in sweat, but I was safe. I peered outside, half expecting this thing to be there, but there was nothing. To this day, I have no idea what that thing was. I can't even rationalize what it could have been. I don't know if this was some sort of cryptid, or maybe it was some kind of alien creature. The way that it tried to avoid my attention, and then crouched, almost like it was mimicking me. It was weird. I actually have avoided that path and area since that day, and I don't live there anymore as I've grown up and moved out. But I've not read or heard any stories in the area about this thing, so I guess that I was just the lucky one. Hi, Raven. Huge fan. Hello, OwlWaitress, and thank you. I love all your stories, and I figured I would share one of my own. I'm sorry if this is long, and I'm no writer, so bear with me. Due to my job closing down, I had to find a place to work that was within walking distance to my apartment, which really didn't leave me with many options. So I ended up working for a famous chain that requires their waitresses to wear orange shorts and white tank tops. I'd been working there for maybe 6 months, and I had my regulars, of course. There was one regular who always came in every Friday. We'll call him Joe. Joe seemed like a nice guy. He tipped well, and we would make small talk, and he'd always request a table in my section. One Friday he came in and ordered, and I brought him his drink, and he asked how school was going, so I told him I was prepping for my psychology final. He asked why I was working instead of studying, and I made a joke that a girl's gotta pay her bills, then went off to take care of another table. At the end of the night, he wished me luck on my final and left a $100 tip. I was extremely grateful and honestly surprised. I aced my final, and the next Friday was happy to tell him how it went. We high-fived, and I took his order as normal. That night, he had asked if I was seeing anyone. I was honest and said no, not with school going on and work. I was just too busy. He then said that if I was his girlfriend, he'd be more than happy to take care of me and let me focus on school. I gave an awkward laugh and told him I'd be back to check on him in a bit. I took my break immediately after that and texted my bestie about what had just happened. She too said that it was a bit creepy. The rest of the night passed by uneventful. That night when I left work, I noticed a truck at the back of the parking lot that I hadn't really seen before, but ended up deciding to pay it no mind. As I neared my apartment, I got that feeling in the pit of my stomach like someone was watching me. I look around and I don't see anyone, but I pick up my pace. As I'm reaching the stairs, I see a guy with a hat and a black hoodie about 10 feet behind me. His head was down, so I couldn't see his face, but something told me that I needed to get inside, and fast. I raced up the 2 flights of steps and locked the door behind me. I peered through the window, and the guy was just standing in the grass, staring at my window. I was so freaked out that I stayed awake until I ended up passing out from exhaustion. The week had gone by in a blur, and I'd been getting back to normal. It was Friday again, and in comes Joe, seemingly happier than normal. I take his order, and I ask him how it's going. He says that he's great, that he's got a new girlfriend and things are really taking off. I congratulate him and wish him well. As I lean in to remove the menus from the table, I feel him sniff my hair. He asks what kind of hair products I use, because his girlfriend has similar hair and he likes the way that mine smells. Creepy comment, but I brush it off and tell him since it does smell like blueberries. I even tell him where he can get it. He says thanks, and the rest of the night is fine until my walk home. Again, as I'm nearing my apartment, I get that eerie feeling that I'm being watched. But there's no one around me that I can see. I make it to my apartment without incident and tell myself that I'm just being paranoid. The next morning, I go to leave for school, rushing because I overslept, and there on my doorstep is a note and a box. I pick up both, sit the box inside, and take the note with me. As I'm walking to class, I pull the note out of my pocket and it says, "For my favorite girl, each moment with you is all I need." Confused, I stuff the note back into my pocket. That evening at work, I go on my lunch break and sit outside towards the back of the parking lot, just scrolling social media. Joe walks up asking how my day is going and if anything exciting happened. I look around because the back patio is for employees only. I asked him how he knew I was back there. He said he'd come in and was told that I'd gone on break, so he went around looking for me. I asked him why, and he said it's because he wanted to make sure his favorite girl was safe. At this point, I'm starting to put it together in my head. I tell him that he's not allowed back here and that he has to leave. He looks down at his feet as he says he'll see me around. I go in to tell my manager what's been happening, and she tells me it's a hazard of the job, and that that's just how men are, and that they can't help themselves. I explain that I think he's followed me home, and she then tells me there's nothing she can do about it. I needed the job, so I told myself that I would have to deal with it until I could find something else. In the meantime, every time he came in, I would trade Joe's table with another waitress, and each time he would stare at me the whole night. Every week I would come home to packages and notes from candy to stuffed animals, hair products, and my favorite manga. The notes started out nice, and then as time progressed, they became worrying. He would say things like he knew my route home, and how I would be alone every night, and how it wasn't safe for a girl to be alone, and that anything could happen. At the start of my last week there, he showed up every day and just stared daggers at me for hours. By that Wednesday, I decided that I'd had enough and could deal with the hits to my wallet missing those last few days. I'd gone to class, come home and napped, and woke up somewhere around 6ish. The sun was setting and I'd gotten hungry, so I decided to run up to the Sprouts, a grocery store, around the corner for half-off sushi. I go in, grab my things, and as I'm walking out, I see Joe in his truck just looking at me. I try to pretend like I didn't see him and speed walk towards my house. As I'm half walking, half running, I hear his truck behind me. I don't turn to look, but I tuck my things tightly into my arms and take off at full speed across the parking lot. I can see the lights from his truck behind me, so I dart across the front lawn and through the bottom apartments. I hear his car come to a screeching halt and then footsteps coming up from behind me. My heart is pounding. I'm fumbling with my keys as I run up the stairs. I slam the door behind me, and as I'm locking it, I hear him begin pounding on the door, trying to turn the knob. I yell at him to go away before I call the cops. He's screaming things at me through the door about how I led him on for months, how he's been doing all the right things to show he's interested, but I just ignore him, and how I was treating him like he was nothing. I yell again that I'm calling the cops, and it goes silent. I know, I should have called, but cops make me nervous. And I have to say that I don't feel comfortable calling them. I was just hoping that he would go away with the threat alone. That night, I'd called my best friend to come stay with me for a few nights to keep me company, as I didn't want to sleep alone. That night, as we were sitting on the couch watching anime, my phone starts chiming. Back-to-back notifications. I look down at my phone, and there's Facebook Messenger and Instagram DM notifications. I open them, they're all from Joe. I had no idea that he'd been on any of my social media. He had tried to tag me in a relationship notification on Facebook as his girlfriend. There were people in the comments saying, "Congratulations, and I'm so happy for you." I immediately untagged myself and blocked him on both Facebook and Instagram. About 30 minutes later, I get a Facebook message from a page that didn't have a picture. I figured it was him, but before I could block it, the messages started flowing in. He said that he's loved me since he first saw me, that he knows we're meant to be together, that he's the only one for me, and if I can't see it, then he's going to show me. At that point, my best friend demanded that we go to the police. I took screenshots and gathered up the notes and gifs, but because I didn't know his last name, they wouldn't give me an order of protection. I literally felt defeated. My old job didn't care. The police couldn't do anything until I could either get more information or something violent happened, and he was caught in the act. With no other options, I moved back in with my parents a few towns over, switched to online classes for the rest of the semester, and I didn't leave the house without another person. I'd get random friend requests for a few weeks after that from who I assumed was Joe, and would just block them. Then it stopped. With that being our last semester, my best friend and I decided to move further north, and I haven't seen or heard from him since. I really hope that he gets the help that he needs, and I hope that I never see him again. Hey Raven, this is my first time submitting a story, or telling anyone about this as a matter of fact, but it's one of those memories that just keeps popping back up. It might not be the most exciting story to happen to someone, but it sure keeps me up at night. I was a goody two-shoes teen and never touched a drug in my life. When I was about 17, one summer I would walk my dog around my neighborhood at night. It was a relatively safe neighborhood, and I lived in South Florida, so it was too hot to go during the day. Not to mention there were other dog walkers during the day, and I hated making small talk with the retired residents of my neighborhood. I was a bit shy. One night when walking my dog, I was suddenly stopped in my tracks when an orb of light hovered above the ground, around 20 feet in front of me. It was only maybe a foot above the ground directly in the center of the road, and about the size of a softball, or maybe a bit larger. It almost looked like an LED light, blue and white in color, and as a very solid ball, there wasn't much reflection on the ground. Just as fast as I could process what I was seeing, it blinked out of existence. A few seconds passed, and it appears again, even further down the road before blinking out again. Almost like a huge white firefly, but being in South Florida, we don't even really have fireflies. The moon was bright enough that I could see that the road was completely barren where it disappeared from. It almost felt like it was beckoning me, or leading down a path the way it moved further down. But I didn't get closer to investigate. I noped out of there. It happened again a few nights later on a different street in my neighborhood, blinking 3 times in and out of existence. Same height, hovering above the ground and about 20 feet away, appearing further and further away each time. For some reason, being 17, this did not stop me from walking my dog at night, although it definitely should have. It must have been about a month later when my boyfriend and I went on a motorcycle ride. He was a bit older than me, but also never touched drugs in his life. He was a car and bike guy, so we frequently went on drives on his motorcycle. This time it was about 10 p.m., earlier than I had seen the lights in my neighborhood. The boyfriend and I were riding around town and then down a usually pretty busy 2-lane main road. At this hour, there were a few cars passing by in the other direction every few minutes. Driving along, everything was fine, until all of a sudden that same kind of ball of light was nearly at our height, just barely at our heads, a few feet in front of us, but a bright orange-yellow this time. It was so close that we both ducked under it, and the bike swiveled a bit. I literally watched it appear out of nowhere. I was staring at the road in front of us from behind him the whole time. He yelled back, "Did you see that? What was that?" Had it not been for his reaction at the same time as mine, I might have assumed that I was crazy. This actually happened a few years back when I was in college, so it would have been around 2018. Back then, I was a very social person. I liked to hang out in large gatherings, go out to events, etc. You get the idea. That year was actually the last year that I went to house parties. Partially because of COVID 2 years later, but mostly because of this event. I'd gone to a house party that was hosted by a really good friend of mine, Wayne. Wayne is a weird guy. He likes parties, but he's also kind of a stiff. He wasn't the type to throw wild bashes. He was the one that planned out a gathering, made sure that everyone knew that closing time was 10:30 p.m., and kept things within what the law said was okay. The plan of this party was that it would be a small to medium-sized get-together. No more than 20 or so people total throughout the house and yard. Just people that we both knew pretty well. But as the night went on, I noticed that the count of people was definitely more than 20. I leaned over to Wayne at one point and asked if he invited more people than he told me, and he took a look around the party and gave a bit of a scowl. He hadn't. He mentioned that there was a group of guys that he didn't know that showed up a few minutes ago, and that he just hadn't had the chance to talk with them because he'd been talking with everyone else. I patted him on the shoulder and mentioned that I would go talk to them for him if he wanted, and he said that he would really appreciate that. I walked up to the small group that was standing off to the side, just chatting amongst themselves, and lifted a hand to sort of wave in a friendly way. I'm the diplomatic type. I tried to keep the conversation light and casual, assuming that maybe these guys just didn't know they weren't supposed to be there. I didn't want to make a scene or be rude. They could be good guys. I asked one of the guys how he knew about the party, and he mentioned a mutual acquaintance of Wayne and I, a guy named Jason. I nodded, asked if Jason told them about it, and they sort of shrugged it off and said that they were friends of his, and that's where the conversation tapered off. With that information, I went back to Wayne to let him know. Upon hearing the name, Wayne's expression changed to one of annoyance. He said that Jason had actually done this before, and that he was going to have a talk with him. Jason was actually a coworker of Wayne's, so Wayne definitely treated him with kid gloves when it came to these things, because he didn't want to have to sort out any bad blood with someone he worked with. I could tell that this, however, was a breaking point. Wayne asked me to come with him just in case, and I agreed. As we walked towards the backyard, I noticed that the group of unfamiliar guys was headed in the same direction, just ahead of us, which made me feel a bit uneasy for some reason. We got outside just in time to witness the horrifying scene. That group of guys had jumped Jason. They were relentless as they beat him senseless, punching him, kicking him, beating him harder and harder. It was a quick but very intense assault, and after just a few seconds of chaos, they stopped. One of them leaned over Jason, who was completely motionless, and yelled, "Consider this a warning. Next time, it'll be your last." Then, in a show of audacity that still haunts me to this day, the group walked calmly through the party out the front door and all got in a car and drove off. They didn't rush, they didn't glance back, they didn't do a damn thing to hide who they were. They walked, as if they owned the place, as if they were untouchable. In the aftermath, of course, 911 was called, and an ambulance arrived to tend to Jason, who I honestly thought was dead. Thankfully, he wasn't. Despite the attack, Jason refused to identify his attackers. He claimed that he had no idea who they were, and that he'd never met them. It was pretty clear that he was covering for them for whatever reason. Nothing came of this event, at least not to the best of my knowledge. They were never identified, and I haven't seen any of them since. As for Jason, I haven't really seen him either. This was also the last time that Wayne had an actual house party, which is completely understandable. We can all speculate what the hell this was, but it was pretty clear that Jason had upset someone that he shouldn't have. And I think that it's best that we all just left it at that. There is a time in most of our lives when we seem to temporarily forget some of the forms of human decency that our parents taught us. This usually occurs sometime during the young adult stage, a time when we seem to think that we can pass off certain forms of selfish, ill-mannered behavior as thinking for ourselves. And that was the case with my husband and I on this particular day. What can I say? We were bored that night, and an opportunity for free instant fun seemed to impeccably land itself right into our laps. And so, we graciously accepted it. It was 8 in the evening, and the first day of the November Daylight Savings Time, which had just gone into effect, so it seemed like it had been dark outside all day, instead of just a few hours. We were about to move the following day, so our cable had already been transferred to the new address, and we had mindlessly packed every one of our DVDs into God only knows which of the 8 million boxes piled in our dining room. Quite unexpectedly, our phone rang. My husband and I looked at each other puzzled because we thought that our phone service had been turned off to be transferred to our new address. And, oddly enough, the phone hadn't rang all day. My husband just shrugged his shoulders, so I answered the phone and he sat beside me, and could hear the entire conversation. Right after I said hello, I could hear a rude, aggressive male voice speaking urgently to someone in the background. "What did you say you wanted on that again?" It was obvious that the caller was not yet aware that someone had answered the phone on my end. I didn't recognize the voice. Again, I said hello in a questioning tone, hoping to alert the caller that the phone had been picked up. The caller responded in a nasty tone that suggested that I'd said or done something rude to him, which I hadn't. "Hello?" The caller said rudely. "Hello? You better wait a damn minute." He snapped at me. My mouth gaped open in shock, but before I could speak, the caller resumed talking to me. "Hello? Yeah. Give me a large pepperoni pizza with extra cheese, an Italian sausage, and mushrooms. And 2 large steak and cheese subs, one with extra meat, but with no onions on the extra meat one." The caller spoke in a nasty tone as if he was ordering someone around who knew better than to cross him. Perhaps a servant. He continued with his order, clearly talking down to me. "And I want an order of 25 hot wings with a side of barbecue sauce, and 2 extra blue cheeses, and a 2-liter of orange soda." The caller had not allowed me to get a word in thus far, and once again, before I could inform him that he had the wrong number, as sort of an afterthought, the caller spoke in a snarling but humor-laced tone as if trying to impress someone around him at my expense. And their amused giggle confirmed it. Oh, y'all can keep that nasty carrot celery stuff for your own dinner, because I don't eat that stuff. And I don't want to be waiting all night for my stuff to get here. And y'all had better not forget my damn soda. Suddenly, an angry rush flowed through me. I spoke. Okay, sir. That'll be $27.50 with delivery, I said in the most cheerful voice. The caller paused for a few seconds. What? $27.50? You sure? The caller's voice now sounded like a nice guy all of a sudden. Yes, sir, I said in a cheerful voice. We're running a special today. If you purchase 2 subs, you get a huge discount on everything else that you ordered. That's the bomb. Y'all are the bomb. The caller praised in that cunning, superior tone that people use when they've just gotten over on someone. Sir, where will we be delivering this to tonight? I asked in the most respectful tone that I could muster. My husband looked at me wide-eyed as if he'd suspected that I may have completely lost my mind. Almost as if he was worried that he and I would actually have to prepare this order and deliver it. When I was in my early 20s, I thought I had all the answers because, after all, I was grown. As I look back on those days, I'm amazed at how dumb I was. This reflection of stupidity was confirmed when my husband and I were genuinely shocked and caught off guard when, after an hour, the guy called back to inquire on the status of his order. The driver hasn't gotten your order to you yet, sir? I asked, pretending to be surprised and confused. He left nearly half an hour ago. Sir, I am so very sorry. He should be there in about 5 minutes, I assure you. Between the time that I ended the initial call with this guy and the time that he called back to check on the status of his order, curiosity had prompted my husband and I to do a little research and simple arithmetic. We discovered that the order that we told the caller would total less than $30 would ordinarily have cost over $50 in most pizza places. We wondered how the caller could have been naive enough to believe that an establishment could afford to present such an offer, one that wouldn't yield any profit at all, and would actually cost them money. My husband and I laughed until our eyes teared up and stung. The humor suddenly vanished from my husband's face, and it was replaced with worry. What if they call back again, though? He asked in a nervous whisper, and the expression on his face made me fall right back into another laughing frenzy. These are just people, not the boogeyman. They can't do anything to us. They don't even know who we are, I assured him with a smirk. Besides, maybe this will teach them a little something about common courtesy and telephone etiquette. The truth was that I resented the ill mannerisms of the caller and thought that he would dare to speak that way to a fast food employee. It infuriated me, as half my friends at the time were working in fast food. The phone rang. It was now almost 9 o'clock, so I knew it couldn't possibly be anyone else besides our rude caller. I reached to answer it with a sinister grin on my face. My husband got to the phone first. I thought to myself, oh well, there goes my last bit of fun for tonight. Old Johnny Joykill is going to tell them they have the wrong number. Prematurely, I exhausted a bored sigh. Hello, sir. This is the manager, and before you go off on me, I want to sincerely apologize for my employee's incompetence. I had to look twice to make sure that the voice was coming from my husband's mouth and not from the TV. He continued, apparently, our delivery guy quit on us tonight, and he took your food with him. My husband spoke his words so fast that the caller didn't get an opportunity to say anything. We've already prepared a brand new order for you, and it's out for delivery. Our driver has a white Lincoln Town car with a red ragtop roof, and if you look out your window right now, you should be able to see him approaching your house in less than 60 seconds. Finally, my husband gave the caller a chance to speak, and he tilted the phone receiver for me to listen in. Oh, okay, 'cause I was about to say that this is taking all night. Are they even coming? Answer, we've actually knocked off half the price. And we threw in another double meat steak sub and upgraded your wing order from 25 to 50, just to express our sincere apologies, and to assure that we may keep you as a customer. Again, I am so very sorry for all of this mix-up tonight, sir." I was indeed impressed by my husband's Oscar-worthy performance. "Oh man, don't even worry about it. We're cool." The guy's tone sounded friendly, as if he were talking to an old friend. "Then you will order from us again?" my husband asked, with exaggerated humility, sounding just like a manager trying to salvage his business clientele. "Oh, for sure, my man, for sure." I could actually hear the pleased grin in the caller's voice. "Okay, well, I'm gonna hang up now so you can go out and meet our driver. His name is Charles, and he's shining a flashlight on your address plate right now." After my husband ended the call, we took our phone off the hook and just laughed ourselves to sleep. Instant fun. To this day, whenever I order a pizza or wings, I secretly wonder what I would do if it never arrived. Deep down inside, I know that if it doesn't, it would probably serve me right. Hello. Now, the story isn't what most might be used to, seeing as how it's told from the perspective of the one who we would call the stalker. Let me preface this by saying that I am aware that what I did is wrong, and I'm truly sorry for it. For context, I'm a male, now in my 30s, but this takes place in high school about 14 years ago. I attended a large public school, though I won't say where to protect the privacy of those involved. During this time, I was in a severe depression, and seeing as how I was not aware of what that entailed, I thought the feelings I had were perfectly normal. I was in a class called Study Period, during which time I was part of a small, tight-knit group of friends. We had dubbed ourselves the Breakfast Club, after the film of that name. Instead of studying, we would spend an hour and a half just talking about our lives and ourselves. The group consisted of myself, a boy named Eric, who was my best friend at the time, and two girls. Their names were Amber and Cassie. Now, during this time, I was shy and socially awkward, and I had no idea how to approach girls. However, with Cassie and Amber, I never had this problem. In time, I even started to fall head over heels for Cassie. She was everything I liked in a girl. She was smart, fun, loved to read, and on top of that, she was very pretty. Soon, and it shames me to write this, I actually started to follow her around the school, trying to discern her schedule and to try to work up the courage to ask her to homecoming. However, before I could, another boy asked her to go, just as friends, but to me, this seemed devastating. I felt like I had missed my chance, but then I started to reason with myself, thinking that I could just wait until after, and then if she was still single, I could have my moment. Being the complete dolt that I was, I did just that. To my relief, she was still single afterwards, so thinking this would be the chance that I had waited for, I made what I consider one of the dumbest decisions in my entire life. Given that I was too shy to approach her directly, I wrote down my feelings for her in a love letter to the effect of, "You're the best part of my day. Every time I get to see you is amazing. You're the most perfect girl I have ever met, and I would like to know more about you." I did not sign it, seeing as how I thought that if I didn't, I could just wait and see and gauge her reaction. When she got up to use the restroom, I slipped the letter into her backpack. The following day, I eagerly awaited Study Period, believing I would be able to declare myself as her admirer that morning, thinking she would be receptive to it. Instead, I was called into the teacher's office and confronted with the letter. The teacher straight up told me that my letter was unacceptable, and that's far from receptive, Cassie was frightened and in tears over it. Needless to say, I got detention for that incident for a whole week. Thankfully, my parents never found out, as I had fibbed about staying after school for afternoon classes. My mental state, which was already bad, promptly deteriorated further, to the point where I even began to contemplate taking my own life. I'm sorry to say that my obsession with Cassie continued for some time afterwards, but to my dismay, she had already deduced my name and blocked me on all social media, and I never saw her again. Long story short, I got moved out of that class and very nearly did end my life out of guilt. However, I eventually confided in my parents about my depression, and after a year of therapy, I was able to recover and move on with my life. I know this isn't terribly interesting or scary, but I will say that it was by far the darkest, most traumatic experience of my life. It's been years, but I confess that I still do feel a bit of guilt for what I did, and if I could, I would say to Cassie, wherever she is, how sorry I am. Bear with me. This is going back to the 70s. But enjoy the ride if you can handle a ride back in time. It's been so long since I even thought of this experience, and yet it rates up there. Mysterious, unexplainable, occult. I was living in Chicago at the time, in high school, having moved from the Southwest, and it felt fun, energetic, and yet there was a need to escape from it as well. My father was always cutting out and going on junkets to South America for long weekends, and I was fine with a mild party house while he was gone. But sometimes he would take me along if the holidays were aligned, and so we went on one of these long weekend trips to England and a dip into Wales. I remember it all too well now. The cold of O'Hare Airport, a couple that stood out kissing by a counter. He looked like Mick Jagger, and he was with a woman in fashionable velvet overalls, or some kind of onesie jumpsuit and poofy copper hair. And my grandmother had come along at the last minute. She was a traveler, coming out from her ranch in Washington State and meeting us there. I was hiding in a big army jacket and wearing faded jeans with the police patch that I had swiped from a pile at the police department, that time that my friend and I got flashed and a cop pulled up right afterwards, so we flagged him down. Yeah, we were just out walking and the duster pulled up real slow, and the guy was acting lost, and then he just stared. Well, anyway, he was caught in the alley behind a Chinese takeout. The cop seemed to know exactly where that shrink would be. Yeah, that's what we found out he was. The plane ride felt morose. Flying over the North Atlantic in late November, I hoped that we weren't going down in it, and London was dialed a few notches down from dreary. It was dark, almost as night. Walking around the record shops in Piccadilly, my dad rented a car within a day, and we blew off the big city heading west. It was a dogged trip. The rain poured, and we went from little village to little village in our not super comfy Fiat on mud roads. The whole trip was gray and brown, yet there was something dreamy about looking out the window on the old stone walls and the smeary pubs that we passed. Once we got out and went to a market in the pouring rain, and I got an old used paperback book of ghost stories that were super British and full of castles and deranged geniuses. It was fun just slouching in the back, reading this hair-raising stuff while cruising by abbeys, palatial breaks with hedgerows and mazes. There were no more billboards, bright gas stations, none of that. It was full immersion. And nearing one of our last nights, We rounded a corner and pulled into a pub in a deserted edge of a rolled-up sleeping town. We went in to just ask where an inn was, and the corpulent bartender with dark hair and a big smile, wet with sweat, and his hand with a rag up a glass, and we are ordering up a storm of things and laughing. And as my grandmother and dad are talking with the bartender, a gentleman asked if I would play darts with him. We had a strangely great time. I hit a bullseye on my first try. It was true beginner's luck, and we laughed and laughed about it. He had zoomed in the parking lot in a shiny Jag from his job at Lloyd's of London, insuring George Harrison. But then as we spoke about things, he lowered his voice. "You're just traveling through. That's it?" "Yeah," I answered. "So you really don't know where you are? Because this is a damn strange place. So I must tell you, and you can take it upon yourself to find everything I speak of in the morning." He then proceeded to tell me of a church that I would find on a hill to the right in the morn. And if I looked at the top, I would see that instead of a cross, there was a crescent sort of shape, a kind of golden bowl. And that would be the sign that this was not a Christian area, and that the hill the church was on, the church with the bowl instead of a cross, that hill was hollowed, and beneath it was where the Hellfire Club met. And he proceeded to order another ale as he drew a map on the coaster with his Lloyd's of London pen. It was rather cozy upstairs in the pub's inn, and sleep came so fast. The morning was intriguing to me. I told my grandmother and my dad what the gentleman had spoken of the night before. It seemed sort of senseless, but we took off early. It was like 6 or 7 a.m., and there was this mist all around that gave light somehow. And as we got in the car and began to drive, there it was, on a mowed hill above a thick forest. The top of the church could be seen, and yes, it really did have a golden bowl. My father, the driver, was deeply confused by that bowl, and so began to drive toward the winding road leading up the hill to the church. Now, this is where things began to get odder. There was a trail that we saw off the road that led into it, and I suddenly was begging to go up the trail and meet them. I have no idea why. Were my legs cramped? Did I feel I needed a solid walk up the hill on a good, obvious trail? I said that I would meet them at the top, and they agreed. I thought it would be not scary at all. It was morning, and would only become more so. And it was a gentle, quiet woods, a pleasant walk. Yet there was something going on out of the ordinary. And I saw that, along the trail, there were images nailed to the trees. They were not satanic per se. Some were Hindu-looking cutouts, thick and glued to thicker paper. They were put up with intent, all with burned-out candles around them. There were more than the Hindu ones, but that one I swiped for some reason. It was less creepy than the others. I slid it in my army jacket pocket, seeing more and more images deeper off the trail, and then something white, ghost-like. Was it a stray piece of extra thick fog? I watched as it crossed in front of me and went up the hill, and I made note to watch, even though I was frightened. I knew that this was the type of incident that could be forgotten, brushed aside, denied. I was not going to let fear come in, and I knew that this was a rare chance to be in a most strange place. At the top of the hill, we came together again, and we walked around the church. But it was early and it was locked, so we left. We decided to continue our journey, leaving this unforgettable Twilight Zone. Hi everyone. I have an event that happened earlier this year that I still cannot shake. I live in a nice shore town where locals travel up and down the shore to visit other beach towns for dinner, clubs, etc. One night, my friends and I decided to go to a club in a beach town about 20 minutes away. We arrived at about 11 p.m. and met with our guy friends from an hour up north. There were 4 of them, and they came in 2 separate cars. My friend Kaylee and I took a ride share to the club to meet them, and we ended up having a great night, and around 2 a.m., we planned to go to a local/nicer gas station or food place that is open 24/7. Kaylee and I jumped in the car with 2 of the guys, who were sober. We got to the gas station, which was in a pretty dangerous area, but figured that we would be safe because we were with 4 guys and in a well-lit place. When we arrived at the gas station, we parked parallel to the other car with the other 2 guys inside. We went inside to look for hot dogs. I'm not sure why we were craving them at 2 a.m., but we couldn't find any. The 6 of us get back outside and head into the cars that we came in. Kaylee, me, and the 2 guys we came with, and the other 2 guys in their car parallel to us. I was in the passenger seat and Kaylee was behind me in the back seat. We rolled down our windows so that we could talk to our friends in the car next to us. The cars were also turned off, so we didn't kill the battery. We spent about 25 minutes talking, laughing, and just having a good time parked there. It was about 3 a.m. at this point. Out of nowhere, we saw a guy in a gray hoodie with hands in his pocket run up to our friend's car parallel to us, and he said, "Hey, got any girls in the car?" Our friend went silent and then said, "Bro, no, get away." The guy in the hoodie then ran up to our car and peered into the driver's side back seat completely silent, just staring at Kaylee and our guy friend. We then noticed the gun in his pocket with his hand on it. I noticed, as well as the guy driving, and we whispered to Kaylee to get down. Kaylee and I slid down into the seats as far as we could. I've never felt that much fear in my life. I felt like we were sitting ducks. The guy then lifted the gun up at the car and walked around the car just staring at us through the open window. We didn't know what to do. We were begging under our breath for our friends to turn on the car and drive away, but he didn't want to make any sudden movements or leave our other car of friends stranded. There was also no easy way out of the parking lot, just an alleyway or a long way through the entire gas station area. The guy with the gun then stands in front of our 2 cars. At this time, our friend driving turned the car on, and the guy with the gun came running at us so fast. It all happened so quickly, but our friend driving the car sped into the alleyway next to the gas station store. The man with the gun then jumped into a car that had someone else driving and followed us, hitting the back of our bumper until we caught speed and were ahead of him. We sped down that road, making random turns so fast until we lost them. We finally got away, and then realized our other car of friends wasn't on the road with us. Terrified, we called them immediately. Thankfully, they told us that they were safe and had driven off in the other direction. We never got a chance to call the cops that night. It all happened so fast, but I wish that we did. I came to find out through friends and people in the area that this is a common gang initiation tactic, holding people at gunpoint, taking the girls, and then leaving them out in the middle of the street. It's terrifying to think about what could have happened if our friends driving the 2 cars weren't thinking clearly. I hope I never feel that amount of fear again, and still, to this day, my heart drops when I see people with their hands in their pockets at night. I live in Glasgow, Scotland, and at the time of this story I was 14 and my brother was 13, and we lived with our divorced mother. Let me begin by saying that I have never seen any form of paranormal entity in my life. I'm open to the paranormal and would welcome reassurance that, when I die, I'm going somewhere good. But as the story continues, you'll discover the reason why I don't have anything paranormal happening to me. March 2000 was the beginning of this nightmare. My mother was a hard-working woman and very easygoing, and my brother was the same. The event started when I asked my brother why he left his TV on all night, and he replied with a wobble in his voice. "He won't let me sleep." Confused, I asked, "Who won't let you sleep?" "The miner," my brother replied. "He just keeps talking all night, but I can't quite hear what he's saying. He stands at the window and won't go away." I told my mom about this, and she said that she would speak to him. Fast forward 3 nights, and I woke up to a loud moaning sound, like your typical spooky moan. So I ran to my brother's room, assuming it was him. When I saw him, he said, "What is that?" The moaning continues, but is coming towards the room. My brother was frightened. I was angry. As the moaning continues, the room door opens slowly, and in crawls my mother, saying, "Help me, help me." She was the one doing the moaning. So we picked her up and ran into her room, screaming, "Do it to me, you bastard! Come on, do it to me!" It took a while, but I calmed them down enough for my mom to tell us what happened. She said, "I woke up, son, and there were all these people standing around my bed just staring at me. And they were talking, but I couldn't make out what they were saying." For weeks after, my brother kept talking about the miner, and I said, "I'm not getting this. You're seeing stuff, so is Mom, but I've still yet to really hear or see anything like that." My brother replied very seriously, "They're scared of you." I took that with a grain of salt. Me and my mom sought out and found a medium. Even if it was all rubbish, having a medium do a cleansing would make them feel better. The medium arrived and immediately said, "There's a man. His face is dirty. He was a local miner." You see, where I live was a mining and steelworks town. The medium continued, "Mum, your family visited you a wee while ago. They're sorry that they scared you." My mum was so frightened that she didn't recognize any of them. I then asked the medium, "Why haven't I seen anything?" And she replied, "They are scared of you." I asked, "Why would my family be scared of me?" And she said, "No, they are all scared of you. I mean, even the bad stuff out there is afraid of you. You're different. But you already knew that, didn't you?" So, that, my friends, was a collection of true scary stories from you, the listeners, the audience, the subscribblers, those who send stories to me, get their stories in these kinds of videos sometimes because I don't always have enough for a collection of specific topics like cryptids or other things. So I put them together in a nice collection of true scary stories from you. And that's what this was. Yeah. A huge thank you to everyone who submitted their stories for this video. Thank you so very much. These were amazing stories. I loved every single one of them. And I hope you guys did too. I also want to mention that this video is technically special. I don't know if anyone has kept count or paid much attention to things, because I don't really put it out there in the description of the video things or whatever. It's mostly an internal coding thing whenever I render out my videos. But this video, this True Scary Story collection, on this, the June 14th of 2023, is technically episode 500. Now, you may be thinking, but Raven, you've done so many more videos than 500. Yes, I have. I have done compilations, I've done remakes, I've done special videos, I've done some fiction stories in the past on this channel, and mathematically I have, and live streams, can't forget those. And I have mathematically done more than 500 videos, but this video in my numbering of files, which goes back to December 9th of 2019, is EP 500. So, big one to celebrate. Here's to 500 more, right? We'll get there eventually. Anyways, friends, hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, please do hit that subscribe button. If you're feeling ever so bold, you can leave me a comment down below letting me know your thoughts, how you're doing. If you had any stories like this or have any answers to the questions that were asked in these stories. Definitely some weird ones in there with some really creepy ones, so really good grab bag mix today. So, yeah. You can also submit your stories to me if you have one at astheravendreams.com and just click the button to do so. It's on the middle of the screen. It's a big button. I think it says submit your stories or send me your story or something like that. It's a button that says that. It's obvious if you go to the website, but yeah. A lot more coming the rest of this month, a lot more coming the rest of this year. I have so many good plans this year. We're going to have a fantastic rest of 2023, I promise you guys. It's crazy to think we're halfway through the halfway mark of the year. It's already June 14th, so yeah. 2023 is flying by. But it's been a good year. It really has, so let's keep it up. Well, my friends, I hope I do see you again here very soon, but until then, remember, you are loved, you are valid, you are important, you're the best you that you can be. Never let anyone tell you otherwise, and don't forget it. And until I see you again, much love, and sleep well.